This is weird borders for the Mid-Atlantic. We'll start over here with New York, which has this island that looks like it should be part of Connecticut. This is because of the border that was drawn like this. Even though this island is closer to Connecticut, it's like a geographic extension of Long Island. It's on the same landmass, but this part is underwater. That's the reason for this weird border. But the next one is right here in New York City, but the border looks neat and all good here. But then there's this mess here where there's two enclaves of New York inside of New Jersey, including one that's on an island. And then the border, even more of a mess here. It looks like it should just go here because this is on New Jersey side, Staten Island. But this is a full-fledged borough of New York City. So this borough is Staten Island. The border goes around, goes through an island, goes around here, just goes sweeping through here, and then it goes back out. Why it's like this, we don't really know, but it was as a result of many negotiations because New York just really wanted Staten Island. It's all started over an argument of what the Hudson River was. They said the border was at the center of the Hudson River. But is the Hudson River here or here? Well, apparently New York won that argument. They said it's here. The next one is between New Jersey and Delaware. There's these pieces of Delaware on the wrong side of the river. This is because the border here, this is a big circle, and the border inside the circle is the west bank, is on the eastern bank of the Delaware River. And these areas got reclaimed from the river. But this is outside of the circle, so the border is this circle here. Then there's this one, the Delaware Arc, which actually, this was once a disputed territory because Pennsylvania claimed they owned this bit because the circle went like this. But Delaware claimed that Pennsylvania had no claim to it. Delaware, they settled that. They settled that reasonably. Then we're going to go up to Pennsylvania, which looks nice until you wonder why Pennsylvania has a coast on Lake Erie. Again, negotiations. Pennsylvania bought Erie from New York because New York already had enough coast on the Great Lakes, and Pennsylvania, they wanted some access to the water. I mean, come on, Pennsylvania, they got cheated out of Delaware, which we're going to go over in a second. So they didn't have an Atlantic coast, so they wanted something. Because Delaware was once a part of Pennsylvania, but then it declared independence. And Pennsylvania, nobody's entirely sure whether it's landlocked or not. Some say the Delaware Bay only goes up to here, so it's landlocked. Some people say the Delaware Bay goes all the way up to Philadelphia, so it isn't landlocked. I don't know, I think it isn't, because the tide goes up here, so I think Pennsylvania is not landlocked. Now, this is just a mess. Maryland's borders are just a mess. The peninsula that Delaware sits on has 3 states on it. Maryland owns part of it, Virginia owns part of it, and then Delaware's on it. So Maryland initially claimed all of this peninsula. At the same time, Pennsylvania claimed it. So Pennsylvania claimed this entire thing, and Maryland did too. So Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon drew the Mason-Dixon line, which went across here, and it went down and cut the peninsula in half. But Virginia, since Maryland, that sent a message to Virginia that Maryland was giving away land. They'd set the Potomac River as the border. Virginia claimed that that meant that the border should go out from the mouth of the river. So they staked their claim and got it. So that left Maryland with only a tiny coastline, which they're still upset about to this day. That's not the end of the weird borders with Maryland, though. the border here, it's not in the center of the Potomac, but rather on the southern bank, which leads to all these weird things where Maryland has a bit of land on the wrong side at random spots. And then there's this island in Washington, D.C. that's totally on Virginia's side, right here, but it's D.C.'s, because the border was like this, but Maryland created D.C., so D.C. inherited Maryland's weird borders. Now we're going to go out to the west, because Maryland doesn't already have enough weird borders. They set the southern border as Maryland as the Potomac, but the northern one was on the Mason-Dixon line, and the two almost crossed here. So that Maryland would have two separate parts if they did. And the western end of Maryland is at the source of the Potomac, and it goes straight up from the source of the Potomac to meet their northern border. But Pennsylvania goes out this way, continues until this, which leaves West Virginia with this awkward panhandle. Now, the last one I'm going to do is that New York and Vermont border, which is in this lake. But this is interesting because they only fixed it a little while ago. Initially, the border used to go up here, and it cut through the lake back in the colonial times. Not colonial times, back in the days of the Vermont Republic. It cut through the lake, and it went through these islands. So New York decided to sell this to Vermont. They said, from this river here westward, you can get it. So you can have most of the lake, Lake Champlain. But not all of it. And then there's another thing that is technically in the mid-Atlantic. It has to do with Canada. But there is an Indian reservation here. Where is it? Right here. That strangles the border. It's on both sides. They own this St. Regis. They own this town. But there are absolutely no border crossings in this reservation. You can cross the border freely. So, like, if we go here, this town is split up by the border, right here. And there's no border crossing, as you can see, because it's a reservation, and the tribes are entitled to not have their nation be split up. So there you have it. That is weird borders for the mid-Atlantic. I also included Maryland and Delaware because the southern states video would be too long, and also you couldn't mention the New Jersey southern border without mentioning Delaware, and then you have to mention all of Delaware's anomalies. So that's why I included Maryland and Delaware in this one, even though they're considered southern states. Well, thanks for watching.